It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the movies of April 12th, 1996. 6 movies to look at today, so let's just go ahead and get right to it, and we'll start off with the biggest new release of the weekend, and that is the big screen adaptation of Roald Dahl's James and the Giant Peach.
From Walt Disney Pictures
Come on, James!
comes the wildest,
Holy shipwreck!
weirdest,
You enormous bugs!
fascinating, isn't it? Most exciting motion picture adventure of the year.
He's gonna cut me in half! Let's get out of here!
James and the Giant Peach. The story of a daring explorer,
Where are we?
his extraordinary friends,
We're lost. This is all your fault.
you,
Blithering nitwit! Bite me!
Have you two got
How dare you!
and a bizarre world where anything can happen.
It's a giant shark!
What do we do?
Walt Disney Pictures and the director of The Nightmare Before Christmas invite you to go over the edge
Good heavens! He's committing pesticide!
and beyond your imagination.
Is it not beautiful? A place where dreams come true.
Wahoo!
James and the Giant Peach.
So this is one of those Disney projects that actually was conceived back in the 1980s when Disney was kind of trying to save its animation studio, but it wouldn't take until the later half of that decade to actually do that. Joe Ranft from Pixar was one of the ones who was trying to convince the staff to produce a film version of this, but the movie never came around because of the potential expensive and difficult animation processes and the book's weird subject matter that wouldn't work at that time. But later on down the road, I guess after The Nightmare Before Christmas came out and Henry Selick came on board, they brought the story back up again, and that's why we got this movie. Steven Spielberg was one of the people that was interested in directing the film, so was Danny DeVito back in the 80s, and then Disney picked the film up, and then shortly after Nightmare Before Christmas, they basically gave Henry Selick the keys to do whatever he wanted to do with this. And lo and behold, we have this movie, and while I don't think it's anywhere near as good as The Nightmare Before Christmas is, it still is a very enjoyable movie. It's a film that I think works mostly because it does do a lot of the same things that made Nightmare Before Christmas unique in its own right. But it doesn't take it to another level by adding in live-action elements. It is a nice blending of live-action and stop-motion animation that, again, isn't quite as good as Nightmare Before Christmas, but when you look at the film, there is a lot of effort being put into it. It's still a very enjoyable film, and it works because it has an amazing cast to it. You've got, in the live-action parts, you've got Pete Postlethwaite, Mike Starr, Joanne Lumley, Miriam Margolyes, and then the voice actors you hear in there, Richard Dreyfuss, Simon Callow, Jane Leeves from Frasier, Susan Sarandon, David Thewlis. Just a really good cast overall, and the animation looks friggin' spectacular, man. I mean, this is a movie that's almost 30 years old, and it still holds up even after all these years. Like, that's the power of stop-motion animation, man. It may take a long-ass time to put together, but usually it can be worth it. In this movie, it definitely works here because it does have that stop-motion animation that still holds up after all these years. And again, like I said, it pales in comparison to The Nightmare Before Christmas easily, but there's no reason to knock it off because of that, because it does have a lot of elements that still do make it work. The animation is still great, the voice work is still very well done, the story is very well done, there's still a lot of elements there to really enjoy about the movie. Like I said, it doesn't have the same spark that Christmas had, but take it for what it is. It's still a really enjoyable movie. I really enjoyed it, so I highly recommend it. James and the Giant Peach. So let's move on to the next movie that came out that weekend, and that is Mark Wahlberg and Reese Witherspoon in the thriller Fear.
The work record.
What's the big deal?
Big deal, Laura, is that the guy gives me the creeps, and the girl is my daughter.
This is all about David.
What's wrong with
But your problem with David, not
He's
mine.
not a good guy. Well, this is gonna stop.
Tell me you need me.
I need you, David.
Thanks, Steve. We're friends and practically family.
The guy is a psychopath.
Something that everybody wants, but nobody has. That's why they're trying to keep us apart.
Disappear from my family's life. You got that?
Yes, you should have allowed nature to take its course. In the end, it will anyway.
Mr. Walker, you okay? Get out! Go to call! Lock the door!
The phone is dead.
Fear.
I mean, that trailer pretty much kind of sells you on what this movie is. It's pure 1990s thriller. I mean, Brian Grazer, the producer of the film for Imagine Entertainment, basically described it as Fatal Attraction for teens, and in a way, he's kind of right. This is kind of on that same level. It's like if Fatal Attraction meets MTV, and that not the MTV that we have now, but 1990s MTV. Like, this is a perfect movie that sums it up nicely. And it is pretty interesting. It's a very formulaic thriller, a psychological thriller to say the least, but man, Mark Wahlberg in this movie is pretty damn amazing. Like, he is playing this so over the top and so intensely. Like, you can't help but admire him for going all the way with this. And Reese Witherspoon in here is pretty good too. The cast overall in this movie is pretty good. You got Wahlberg, Witherspoon, William Peterson, Alyssa Milano, Amy Brenneman. It's a standard premise, really. It's a premise we've seen done over and over again in movies like this, but it works perfectly fine. It works perfectly well here, and it mostly works because of the talent on board. Like I said, Mark Wahlberg really steals the show. He's kind of like Edward Norton in Primal Fear. Like, the rest of the movie itself is very formulaic. It's not really all that spectacular in anything or on that level. But again, what does make it work is that the cast is fully committed to this role, these roles that they have to play. And the direction overall is pretty solid. This is James Foley, the same man that gave us Glengarry Glen Ross. And while this is no Glengarry Glen Ross, that's a masterpiece. But this movie, it's just a ton of fun on so many levels just to watch Mark Wahlberg really go all out on this. And he does come off as a legitimate threat, and that's actually one of the strongest things about the movie. He really does sell you on the film. Like, he's really the strongest part of the movie. And like, yeah, it's not a great movie. It's a very formulaic psychological thriller, but his performance in this really does carry the movie to another level that really makes it worth it. The cast overall makes this movie worth it. They really find a way to go above the predictable story and actually make something unique and creative out of it. I really enjoy this movie, man. I know a lot of people probably do not, but man, watch this movie solely for Mark Wahlberg's performance in this. Like, it's really the strongest part of the movie, and it shows how good of an actor Mark Wahlberg can really be. So that is Fear. Let's move on to the next movie that we have here, and that is The Kids in the Hall, Brain Candy.
How do you feel, patient 957?
Like a fresh towel.
Lorber Pharmaceutical, makers of the world's leading tablet for gas,
Fascinating.
was in trouble.
My empire is crumbling!
They needed a new product.
You might be releasing the most effective antidepressant ever! Go on. Really don't have my notes with me.
They needed it now.
Is it ready for production? Yes, sir. It's ready to go. Have there been any side effects? Yes, sir. A few side effects. Woohoo! Is this the result we're looking for?
Paramount Pictures and Lakeshore Entertainment present the first motion picture from the Kids in the Hall.
We think that everyone should have access to it, like ghetto children. Apparently their lives are horrible.
If you know them, you know what to expect.
Really kinky stuff like two dogs making love with a cat.
If you don't,
Hey, you kids, get out from under that lady's dress!
we apologize in advance.
That line probably sums up the best way to describe this whole movie. If you're a fan of the TV show, then you pretty much should know what you're going into with The Kids in the Hall. If you've never seen it, you probably are not going to get most of the jokes that are in here. And I was one of those people that never saw the Kids in the Hall TV series. I knew the people that were involved in them because I'd seen them in other stuff. Dave Foley, Kevin McDonald, Mark McKinney. Like, you've seen these guys in other works before, but I guess because I wasn't really into Kids in the Hall at first, I never really got fully invested into this. But, once you watch the show and all that, and you watch this movie again, you really do start to see the unique style of comedy that actually does come from this. I think this movie this is one of those movies where I would say you need to watch the Kids in the Hall style shows to get their style of humor to really appreciate what kind of a movie this is, because it is a weird mixed bag of a comedy. Like, it was so polarized at the time that when Siskel and Ebert did their review for this, that was one of their more heated arguments they had in a long time. Gene Siskel really liked it, calling it very funny, calling it a midnight cult film, thinking that it was going to be the next Rocky Horror Picture Show. And then Roger Ebert basically said that he didn't laugh once. He found it awful, terrible, dreadful, stupid, idiotic, unfunny, labored forced, painful, bad. I mean, those are the same type of things that he said about North, but I mean, I would think that he would have liked this a little bit better than North, because let's be honest, North was not a very good movie to begin with. But I digress. Yeah, I think if you really want to get a lot of the enjoyment factor out of this movie, it helps to watch the show. I think that was my biggest mistake, watching this for the first time and not realizing that maybe if I watched the show a little bit, I could kind of figure out what kind of a style of humor that these guys are going for. Because I thought it was basically another SNL type of humor. I mean, Lorne Michaels is the producer of it, and I do like one of the characters in here. The head of the pharmaceutical company literally looks like Lorne Michaels, and that's really what I thought. That was really actually kind of clever and funny. But other than that, though, the movie itself is just very odd. Like, it's a very odd film that works the best if you've seen what the style of humor these guys do. It's better if you watched it on that front, but other than that, if you haven't seen the show, you really will not get the full comedic style that these guys go for here. I think it's a very mixed bag of a film. If you've seen the show, you'd probably get a kick out of it. If not, yeah, it's probably one that you're going to instantly regret watching almost immediately. So, not really a good sum up of what you can expect from this, but that's just kind of how I felt about it. So, that is Kids in the Hall Brain Candy. That's one you'd have to make up your mind on for yourself. So, let's move on to the next movie, and that is Franco Zeffirelli's version of the classic story of Jane Eyre.
I have done what I can for the child. We'll stay there until morning. But she has a willful, obstinate nature.
As a child, she found the strength to survive. As a woman, she discovered the power to love. From acclaimed director Franco Zeffirelli comes the greatest love story of all time.
I'm a free human being, independent, with a will of my own.
Jane Eyre.
This is actually one of 12 different versions of this story that has been told, and there's also been a lot of related works to one of the other stories, White Star Goes to Sea, which we've actually looked at one of the adaptations for this a while back in 1993, but this is, I believe, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5... 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th, the 10th version of this story, and it's very similar to the original novel. It compresses and eliminates most of the plot in the last quarter of the book to condense it down into a 2-hour movie. You have William Hurt playing Mr. Rochester. Jane Eyre is played as the orphan girl by Anna Paquin, who had won an Oscar a couple of years ago for The Piano, and grown up, she's Charlotte Gainsbourg. You also have Fiona Shaw, John Wood, Geraldine Chaplin, Maria Schneider. Some notable names in here, and really, I honestly never seen this movie or most of these other adaptations of this story, so I don't know how faithful an adaptation it really is. It's got some decent reviews online for Rotten Tomatoes, but yeah, other than that, though, I really don't know too much about this movie. I know Franco Zeffirelli can be a decent director. He's made some decent stuff. Hamlet, Team with Mussolini, which was the next movie they made after this. He made a great version of Romeo and Juliet. But he's also made a lot of misfires, including Endless Love, and really, I don't know how this for adaptation is, because I haven't seen it. I haven't seen any of the adaptations, to be quite honest with you, but that's one of the releases that came out this week, so that's Jane Eyre. So let's go ahead and move on from that one and on to the next movie, and that is Dan Aykroyd starring in Getting Away with Murder.
Lambert was an ethics professor.
Is it just me, or do many of you also feel the world is becoming a more and more hostile place?
With an ethical problem.
I want to thank you for your kindness.
Issue 1, getting away with murder.
You see, he was convinced that his next-door neighbor had gotten away with murder.
Rage lives inside you, screaming for expression.
This upset Jack so much.
I want to see you 6 days a week.
Good.
Can't. How's every other Thursday at 3:15?
Morally, he felt it was his responsibility.
How long does it usually take for the poison to work? 8, 10 seconds, depending on the size of the rat.
To take matters into his own hands.
So, as you can see, Dan Aykroyd plays this college ethics professor who essentially decides to kill his neighbor, who is a Nazi death camp commander. He is played by Jack Lemmon, and it's also got Lily Tomlin and Bonnie Hunt, and it's directed by Harvey Miller, and it's also produced by Penny Marshall, who, of course, made Big and A League of Their Own, which are far superior movies. And, I don't know, this might honestly be contention for maybe the worst thing that Dan Aykroyd has ever starred in terms of a movie. I mean, he's made some pretty bad movies, but he's made a lot of good movies, but this is one that I don't remember really liking a lot when it came out. I mean, I saw this when I was... Not even came out. I was like 7 when this came out. I saw this about almost 20 years ago. I found it in a video store, and I saw Dan Aykroyd was in it, and I really liked Dan Aykroyd, so picked it up for renting it, and then watching it, and I was just kind of like, wow, this really is not funny by any means. Like, this should have more to work with the talent that they have on here, and this is a film that just feels like it's just all over the place. It doesn't really know what kind of a comedy it wants to be. It's hard to... Bottom line, it's hard to make the Holocaust and Nazis funny. Like, especially in modern times. I know we've had times when it has worked in the past, but in 1996, it's pretty hard to do. I mean, it just feels like a movie that had probably a good idea in the original scripting process, and then they saw what they had here and just said, screw it, let's just do it like it is, and then this is the result of it. This is the type of film that we get, and it's not really all that funny or all that interesting, and it's one of the reasons why this movie is largely forgettable, because it doesn't feel like a movie that is worthy of being watched at. Like, it doesn't feel like a film that is completely finished and all that, and I really don't know what else to say about it. It's not a very good movie, and it's definitely one of the lesser comedies I've seen in a long time. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I got for you on that one. Getting Away with Murder. Let's move on to the last movie that we have here, which is Loaded.
I'll be going away for the weekend with some friends. And Rose, of course. We're making a horror film. I want to make love to Rose.
One of you is a killer. Right, can you do that again?
So the plot of the movie is that 7 teenagers go to this country house for the weekend to make this epic movie and a possibly ambitious Celtic fantasy, and as the making of the video drifts from playful hilarity to argument, frustrated ambition, and accusations, intimate details seep into the script, and the gap between fact and fiction closes, foreshadowing later events. And when the group decides to lift the mood with an acid-inspired initiation, secret dreams and fears are revealed, and pent-up emotions released with all these youthful intensity and passion and are abound. And in a way, this premise sounds a little bit too much kind of like a precursor to the Blair Witch Project, kind of. You have these people out in the middle of the woods, and they're trying to make a movie, and it's not a straight knockoff of a Blair Witch Project, but you can definitely see a lot of the elements that are in Blair Witch Project in this particular movie. And just from that trailer alone, I couldn't show you the rest of it, but it's got Catherine McCormick in it, and Tandy Newton, another one of her early film roles. But other than that, though, if the movie doesn't really have a whole lot on Wikipedia, honestly, I can't even find a page for it on Wikipedia. That should probably tell you something about the movie itself. It's probably not one that's really remembered a whole that much. It didn't even have good reviews on IMDb when I looked it up, but it's one of the movies that came out this weekend, so I figured I'd bring it up, but that's Loaded. And so, with that said, that wraps up another edition of Time About the Movies. We have 6 more movies to look at on the next episode, including The Substitute. We also have Mrs. Winterbourne, Dan Aykroyd, Daniel Stern, and Damon Wayans in Celtic Pride, the Mystery Science Theater 3000 movie, August, and For the Moment. So 6 movies to look at next time, and we'll delve into those on the next episode. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for another episode. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time, and until then, as always, take care.